I discovered my fiancée's secret plot with her ex to steal my career, so I planned the ultimate revenge. The moment Michael Chen found the emails, everything changed. Standing in his darkened home office at 2 a.m., the glow of his computer screen illuminated the truth he'd been blind to for 3 years. His fiancée Elise wasn't just meeting her ex-boyfriend Justin for innocent coffee catch-ups. They were methodically stealing every aspect of his award-winning architectural designs, the very work that had just earned him international recognition. Michael's hands trembled as he scrolled through years of correspondence, watching his relationship transform before his eyes from love story to elaborate con. The woman who shared his bed, who wore his engagement ring, who knew his deepest insecurities, had been systematically betraying him to help her ex-lover steal the most important contract of his career. The billion-dollar sustainable urban development project would have cemented his legacy. Instead, it was about to become the instrument of his professional destruction. In 48 hours, both his career and reputation would be obliterated when Justin presented Michael's stolen designs as his own to the selection committee. Most men might crumble. Most men might confront her in a rage. Michael Chen was not most men. As dawn broke over the city skyline, a dangerous calm settled over him. They thought they knew everything about him, his designs, his strategies, his weaknesses. But they had made one critical mistake. They underestimated what he was capable of when betrayed by the two people he should never have trusted. They wanted his life's work. He would give them something else entirely. Before we start the video, buckle up, get ready and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. Michael Chen stood at the podium, the weight of the Crystal Award solid in his hands as camera flashes illuminated the ballroom. The International Urban Design Excellence Award represented everything he had worked toward since founding Horizon Design Group 8 years earlier. His sustainable urban housing complex in Portland had transformed a former industrial wasteland into a thriving community while setting new standards for environmental efficiency. Architecture isn't just about creating buildings, Michael said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. It's about creating futures, sustainable futures where people can thrive regardless of income level. From the front row, Elise beamed up at him, her dark hair elegantly swept up, the emerald engagement ring catching the light as she applauded. Michael met her eyes and momentarily lost his train of thought. Even after 3 years together, her presence still affected him this way. He finished his brief acceptance speech and made his way back to their table, accepting congratulatory handshakes along the way. When he finally reached Elise, she stood and straightened his bow tie before kissing him. "I always knew you would change the world," she whispered against his ear. Later that night, they walked through their loft apartment, champagne glasses in hand. The converted industrial space showcased Michael's aesthetic perfectly. More minimalism, with exposed brick, reclaimed wood, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Elise kicked off her heels and curled up on their sofa. "Have you thought more about moving the wedding up?" she asked, twisting her engagement ring. Michael sat beside her, loosening his tie. "With the West Side development proposal due in 3 weeks, I barely have time to sleep. Which is precisely why we should do it sooner. You need balance, Michael. All work makes for a boring fiancé," she teased, sliding closer. He kissed her forehead. "After this contract, I promise. If we land the West Side development, Horizon will triple in size. We could take that extended honeymoon you've been planning. The one where we visit sustainable architecture in 6 countries. The very same. Half work, half pleasure." Elise laughed and clinked her glass against his. "Only you would consider visiting eco-buildings a honeymoon activity. That's why you love me." "One of many reasons," she agreed, pulling him closer. The next morning, Michael arrived at the Horizon offices by 6. Their modest but growing firm occupied the top floor of a renovated warehouse. His business partner, Tasha Williams, was already at her desk when he arrived. "Shouldn't you be sleeping in after your big night?" she asked without looking up from her computer. "The West Side proposal isn't going to design itself," Michael replied, setting his award on his desk. "Congratulations, by the way. Though I still think we should have attended together." Michael smiled. Tasha had never completely warmed to Elise. "Next time, I promise." He settled into work, losing himself in the intricate calculations of energy efficiency and community space allocations. The West Side development would be Horizon's largest project yet, a mixed-use community incorporating affordable housing, retail spaces, and innovative green technology on 20 acres of abandoned industrial land. The $200 million contract would transform their boutique firm into a major player in sustainable urban design. At noon, Elise arrived with lunch. She chatted easily with the staff while Michael finished a conference call. He watched her through his glass office wall, thinking how perfectly she fit into his world. An interior designer specializing in sustainable materials, she understood his vision in ways few others did. The memory of their first meeting flooded back. 3 years ago, at an industry fundraiser for green building initiatives, Michael had been bored until he overheard a heated debate about reclaimed materials. He turned to find Elise challenging a well-known designer about the ethics of importing sustainable bamboo from clear-cut forests. Her passion and knowledge had impressed him immediately. "You look like you needed rescuing from that tedious conversation," she'd said later, approaching him at the bar. "Actually, I was admiring your takedown of Preston's bamboo sourcing policies." She'd smiled. "Someone had to say it. I'm Elise Winters." "Michael Chen, can I buy you a drink while you tell me more about why Preston's an idiot?" Their conversation had lasted until the event ended, then continued at a nearby cafe until 3 in the morning. By their third date, Michael knew she was different from anyone he'd ever met. Now, as she entered his office with lunch, he felt the same flutter of appreciation. She closed the door behind her. "The renderings for the community gathering spaces are ready," she said, placing a salad on his desk. "I think you'll love what I've done with the interior connectivity to the outdoor spaces. You're a lifesaver. I want those for the board presentation Friday." Elise perched on the edge of his desk. "I can bring them home tonight. We could work on the presentation together." "Perfect." Michael reached for his phone as it buzzed. Chen speaking. "Michael, it's David from the selection committee." David Foster was an old mentor from Michael's university days who now sat on the city's development board. "I probably shouldn't be calling, but I thought you should know there are rumors someone's trying to undercut your bid." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" "Nothing I can substantiate. Just whispers that a competitor might have inside information on your proposal." "That's impossible. We've kept everything in-house." "Well, someone's claiming they can deliver your innovations at a lower cost. Watch your back." After hanging up, Michael noticed Elise watching him intently. "Problem?" she asked. "Nothing serious, just industry politics." Michael hesitated, something tugging at his memory. "Actually, didn't you say you ran into Justin Harlow at that conference last month?" A flicker of something crossed Elise's face. "Justin? Briefly, yes. Why?" "His firm's also bidding on West Side." "Is that why you're concerned?" "Michael, I barely spoke to him." "I'm not concerned," Michael said quickly. "Just curious." Elise smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good, because that relationship ended years before I met you." She glanced at her watch. "I should get back to my office. I have a client meeting at 2. After she left, Michael found himself staring at the door. Justin Harlow was Elise's last serious boyfriend before Michael. They'd dated for nearly 5 years, and though Elise rarely mentioned him, Michael knew their breakup had been difficult. That evening, working late, Michael accidentally opened an email thread in the company's server that included a message from Elise to one of their junior designers. The subject line caught his attention: "RE, Jade meeting follow-up." Michael hesitated, cursor hovering over the message. He wasn't the type to snoop, but Jade could only be Justin Harlow. Why would Elise be discussing him with their staff? Before he could decide whether to read it, Michael heard voices in the hallway outside his office. He quickly closed the email and looked up to see Elise passing by with her phone pressed to her ear, apparently unaware of his presence. "I know time is tight," she was saying, her voice low. "But I'm close to getting access to the final designs. Trust me, it will be worth the wait." She disappeared down the corridor before Michael could hear more. He sat motionless, an uncomfortable sensation forming in his stomach. The conversation could have been about anything: a surprise party, a client project, but combined with David's warning in the email, Michael felt the first hairline crack in his certainty. That night at home, he watched Elise more carefully. She worked on her laptop at the kitchen island while he prepared dinner, occasionally texting someone. "New client?" he asked casually when her phone buzzed for the third time. "Just Jen about our girls' weekend next month," Elise replied without looking up. "Remember I told you about the spa retreat?" "Right," Michael nodded, returning to chopping vegetables. But he clearly remembered Elise mentioning that trip was scheduled for 2 months from now, not next month. It was probably nothing, he told himself, a simple mix-up. Yet as he continued cooking, Michael found himself registering other small inconsistencies in Elise's recent behavior. Unexplained late nights, a new password on her phone, vague explanations about client meetings that couldn't be verified. Elise looked up and caught him watching her. "What?" she asked with a smile. Nothing, Michael replied, turning back to the stove. Just thinking about how lucky I am. But for the first time in their relationship, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted, and Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. For 3 days, Michael buried his suspicions in work, focusing on the West Side development proposal with singular intensity. The seed of doubt remained dormant but refused to die entirely. On Thursday afternoon, Michael left the office early for a site visit, only to discover his appointment had been rescheduled without his knowledge. Frustrated, he decided to surprise Elise by picking her up from her office. When he arrived at Elise's design studio, her assistant looked confused. Elise left for a client meeting at the Riverside Hotel about an hour ago. She should be back around 5. Michael thanked her and was about to leave when he remembered Elise mentioning that morning that her meetings were all in office today. A small discrepancy, but it added to his growing unease. Acting on impulse, Michael drove to the Riverside Hotel. He told himself he was being ridiculous, even as he scanned the lobby and restaurant. Finding nothing, he was about to leave when he glimpsed a familiar figure through the windows of the hotel bar. Elise sat in a corner booth, leaning forward intently. Across from her sat Justin Harlow. Michael froze. Justin was exactly as Michael remembered from industry events. Tall, perfectly tailored suit, confident posture. He was showing Elise something on his tablet, and she was nodding with an expression of intense focus that Michael knew well. He could have walked in, confronted them both. Instead, Michael retreated to his car, hands gripping the steering wheel as he processed what he'd seen. Perhaps there was an innocent explanation. Maybe they'd run into each other by chance. But Michael didn't believe it, and the certainty settled in his stomach-like lead. That night, he watched Elise move around their apartment, cataloging her behaviors with new awareness. She mentioned her meeting had been productive, but offered no details. When her phone chimed with a text, she angled it away from him slightly before responding. At 1 a.m., with Elise asleep beside him, Michael made a decision. He slipped out of bed and went to the home office they shared. Elise's laptop sat on her desk, a machine she used for both personal and professional work. Michael had never had reason to access it before, but now he hesitated only briefly before opening it. The password prompt glowed accusingly. He tried her birthday. Access denied. Their anniversary. Nothing. After 3 failed attempts, Michael stepped back, frustrated. Then he remembered Elise complaining that her office computer system required password changes every 2 months, and how she kept all her passwords in her planner to keep track. He found her leather-bound planner in her work bag and flipped through it. In the back on a small note card, laptop, Phoenix 9174. It worked. Michael didn't know what he expected to find, but his breath caught when he opened her email and saw Justin Harlow's name throughout her inbox. At least 30 exchanges over the past month alone. He opened the most recent, dated yesterday. The modifications to the energy grid design are brilliant. These efficiency metrics will blow the competition away. Need the water reclamation system specs by Monday to incorporate. Attached were early-stage renderings that looked disturbingly similar to Michael's own designs for the West Side project. Michael's hands began to shake. He opened another email from 2 weeks earlier. Meeting went well. Developer loves the community space concepts. When can you get me the cost breakdowns for construction materials? Michael recognized the community space designs as identical to renderings Elise had been developing for Horizon. Email after email confirmed his worst fears. Elise had been systematically sharing Horizon's designs, proprietary technology, and cost estimates with Justin. Some exchanges dated back nearly 2 years, covering multiple projects. But it was a folder labeled West Side Complete that delivered the final blow. Inside were compressed files containing virtually all of Horizon's development work for the bid. The email attaching them had been sent just 2 days ago. All yours. Make sure these are sufficiently altered before submission. The room seemed to tilt around Michael. Not only was Elise betraying him, but she was doing it thoroughly, professionally, strategically. The next morning, Michael called in sick for the first time in years. As soon as Elise left for work, he began a more thorough investigation. He discovered Elise had created a hidden user account on their home network that backed up her phone data. There he found text messages between her and Justin, dating back to before she and Michael had even met. Target acquired. You're right. He's brilliant but completely naive. This will be easier than we thought. Don't get cocky. Get close, build trust. We're playing the long game here. The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. Their entire relationship, from that first chance meeting at the fundraiser to their engagement, had been calculated. Elise had pursued him specifically to gain access to his work, and now, with the West Side development, they were poised to execute their endgame. Michael's first instinct was to confront her immediately, but a deeper, colder logic prevailed. If he revealed what he knew now, he would lose any advantage. Justin's firm would still submit their stolen proposal, and without proof of theft that would stand up legally, Michael might lose everything. When Elise returned home that evening, Michael had composed himself enough to act normal. Over dinner, he deliberately mentioned the West Side project. "I'm concerned about security with this bid," he said casually. "There are rumors someone has inside information." Elise's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Really? That sounds paranoid, Michael." "Maybe, but I saw Justin Harlow at the permit office yesterday. His firm is bidding against us." A flash of alarm crossed Elise's face before she controlled it. "That's hardly surprising. It's a prestigious project." "True, but it got me thinking about your history with him. You never really talk about why you broke up." Elise set down her fork. "It was years ago, Michael. We wanted different things. Have you been in contact with him recently?" Her hesitation was barely perceptible. "We've run into each other at industry events." "Why?" "Because I saw you with him at the Riverside Hotel yesterday." Elise's composure wavered only slightly. "I didn't mention it because I knew you'd misinterpret. He reached out wanting to clear the air since our firms are competing. Professional courtesy, nothing more." Her explanation was smooth, reasonable. If Michael hadn't seen the emails, you might have believed her. "I wish you'd told me," he said, allowing her to believe he was mollified. "You're right. I should have." Elise reached across the table to take his hand. "I'm sorry. No more secrets." Michael squeezed her hand and smiled. "No more secrets," he agreed. That night, as Elise slept beside him, Michael stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. The woman he had loved, had built a life with, had planned to marry, was a fiction. The betrayal was so complete it felt unreal. But amid the crushing pain, a cold clarity emerged. Elise and Justin had spent years orchestrating this theft. They thought they knew every aspect of his work, his process, his thinking. Their confidence made them vulnerable. Michael slipped out of bed and went to his office. Opening a new document, he began to outline a counter-strategy. He would need evidence, leverage, and perfect timing. Most of all, he would need to control his emotions and think 10 steps ahead. If they wanted to play chess with his life's work, he would show them what it meant to be truly outmaneuvered. Michael arrived at the office early the next morning, determination replacing the shock that had paralyzed him the previous day. He greeted colleagues with his usual quiet efficiency, reviewed design modifications with his team, and maintained the precise schedule he'd followed for years. If anyone noticed the slight tightness around his eyes or the way his smile never quite reached them, they didn't mention it. When Elise called mid-morning to suggest lunch, Michael agreed readily. "The usual place at 12:30, he asked, his voice betraying nothing of his knowledge. "Perfect. I have some exciting ideas to the community spaces I want to run by you." Michael knew those exciting ideas would be photographed and sent to Justin before dessert arrived. "Looking forward to it," he replied. After hanging up, Michael received a text from David Foster. "Selection committee meeting moved up. Final presentations in 9 days instead of 14. Can you be ready?" This accelerated timeline could work to Michael's advantage, giving Justin and Elise less time to refine their stolen designs. But first, he needed to understand the full scope of what he was facing. Michael reached out to a college friend who now worked in corporate security. "I need to know who on the selection committee might have connections to Harlow Design Group," he explained during a discreet coffee meeting that afternoon. 3 days later, his friend delivered troubling news. Justin Harlow's uncle sits on the board of Regional Development Partners, which has 2 representatives on the selection committee. And Justin himself has been golfing monthly with Stephen Reeves, the committee chair. Michael absorbed this information calmly. Can they influence the final decision? Not directly. The scoring system is designed to prevent bias, but they could potentially tip the scales in a close decision. This explained Justin's confidence. Even with stolen designs, he had positioned himself with key decision-makers. Michael would need to ensure his counter-strategy overcame this advantage. Back at the office, Tasha cornered Michael in the conference room. "What's going on with you? Yesterday you approved preliminary drawings without even reviewing the structural calculations." "Just streamlining my process," Michael replied, but Tasha wasn't convinced. Even arriving at odd hours, locking your office door, and having hushed phone conversations. If something's threatening this project, I need to know. Michael considered telling her everything, but decided against it. The fewer people who knew, the better his plan would work. Trust me, Tasha. Everything's under control. That night, working late, Michael discovered something concerning. His computer was running unusually slowly, and certain files seemed to have been accessed when he was away from his desk. A quick diagnostic check confirmed his suspicion. Someone had installed monitoring software on his machine. Michael immediately recognized Eliza's handiwork. During their second year together, she had casually mentioned having used similar software to monitor employees she suspected of stealing designs. At the time, Michael had been impressed by her business savvy. Now, he understood it as a warning he'd failed to heed. Rather than removing the spyware, Michael decided to use it. He began leaving his computer unlocked when stepping away, knowing Elise could access it remotely. He created a new folder labeled West Side Final Designs and populated it with convincing but fundamentally flawed plans. The energy grid system he designed appeared revolutionary, but contained a critical miscalculation that would make it prohibitively expensive to implement. The water reclamation system looked elegant on paper but would fail environmental impact requirements. The community space designs were visually stunning but structurally unsound. Each flaw was subtle enough that only thorough engineering review would reveal the problems, yet significant enough to doom the project if implemented. Michael carefully documented the true designs elsewhere, on an encrypted drive kept at his parents' home. 3 days before the final presentation, Michael noticed Elise accessing his computer while he pretended to nap on the couch. Later that evening, she made an excuse about meeting a client for drinks. Michael nodded understandingly. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing his cheek. "It might run late." As soon as she left, Michael changed into nondescript clothes and followed her to a small restaurant across town. Through the window, he watched Elise meet Justin at a corner table. She handed him a flash drive with barely contained excitement. Michael returned home before Elise, feigning sleep when she slipped into bed past midnight. Her perfume carried notes of expensive whiskey and a cologne Michael recognized as Justin's signature scent. The next morning, Elise was unusually attentive, making Michael's favorite breakfast and suggesting they take a long weekend after the bid deadline. "I'm so proud of what you've accomplished with this project," she said, her eyes bright with what Michael now recognized as anticipation rather than admiration. "It's certainly my most innovative work," Michael replied truthfully, though not in the way Elise assumed. At the office, Michael implemented the final phase of his plan. He asked the IT team to conduct routine maintenance on all computers, including a full system backup and security upgrade. While this was standard procedure before major project submissions, it also provided documentation of Horizon's original designs, timestamp verified. Meanwhile, Michael was cultivating a crucial asset, Maria Lopez, a junior engineer at Harlow Design Group who had interviewed with Horizon months earlier. Michael had been impressed with her talent but unable to match Justin's salary offer. Now he reached out to gauge her loyalty to her current employer. "I've been asked to implement designs that don't make engineering sense," Maria confided during a discreet lunch meeting. "When I raised concerns, I was told to make them work without asking questions." "Would you be willing to document this?" Michael asked carefully. "If I had proper employment elsewhere, absolutely." Michael offered her a position at Horizon, contingent on the outcome of the West Side bid, with a significant signing bonus. Maria agreed to provide time-stamped copies of the suspicious designs she'd been working on. The day before the final presentation, Michael installed a small recording device in Elise's car. That evening, he mentioned casually that he needed to make last-minute revisions to the presentation and would work through the night. "Don't exhaust yourself," Elise advised, clearly pleased by his distraction. "Everything looks perfect already." Once alone, Michael activated the surveillance app he'd installed on his own phone, which allowed him to listen through Elise's car system. As expected, she called Justin immediately after leaving the apartment. "I'm heading over now," she said. "He's completely oblivious, working all night on a presentation that won't matter." "The committee's practically salivating over our proposal," Justin replied. "Reeves has all but guaranteed we'll win the bid." What if someone notices the similarities to Michael's previous work? By the time anyone could prove anything, we'll have broken ground. Besides, your boyfriend's designs have enough flaws that we can claim we improved on his basic concepts. Michael's grip tightened on his phone as Justin continued. "You should have seen Reeves' face when I showed him the energy grid design. He called it revolutionary. Elias's laugh was coldly triumphant. Wait until you show him the water reclamation system tomorrow. Michael thinks it's his crowning achievement. Has he mentioned where he's storing his backup files? It would be smart to eliminate those after we win. I'll find them. He trusts me completely. You almost sound regretful, Justin noted. There was a pause before Elise responded. Don't be ridiculous. I've spent 3 years preparing for this. One more day and Harlow Design Group becomes the industry leader in sustainable architecture, with me as head of design. And Chen becomes yesterday's news, Justin added. You're sure he suspects nothing? Michael sees what he wants to see. He still thinks I'm planning our wedding. The conversation continued as they finalized their strategy for the presentation, unwittingly providing Michael with a complete confession of their scheme. When they began discussing more personal matters, Michael ended the recording, having captured everything he needed. Alone in his office, Michael listened to the recording again, his expression hardening with each standing word. The woman he had loved for 3 years had never existed. Tomorrow, both Elise and Justin would learn exactly what that realization had unleashed. Michael sat in his darkened office, the recording of Elise and Justin's conversation playing one final time before he closed the file. His counter-strategy was in place. The false designs were bait that had been eagerly taken. The evidence of theft was secured. By tomorrow evening, he would not only protect his work, but also ensure that neither Elise nor Justin would recover professionally. Yet as the first light of dawn filtered through the blinds, an unexpected hollowness settled in his chest. Michael walked to the window, watching the city slowly illuminate. 3 years of his life had been built on a foundation of deception. Every intimate moment, every shared dream, every whispered promise had been calculated to gain access to his work. But had it all been false? Unbidden, memories surfaced. Elise bringing him soup when he was sick with the flu, staying up all night to help him meet a competition deadline, her genuine excitement when he won his first major award. There had been moments when her guard seemed to drop, when her laughter felt real and her eyes reflected something that looked remarkably like love. Michael shook his head, trying to dislodge these thoughts. The recording was clear. She had spent 3 years preparing for this betrayal. Any genuine moments had been exceptions to her plan, not evidence against it. He returned to his desk and reviewed the documents prepared for the final presentation. The legal team had vetted his evidence. The original designs were secured. Horizon's attorneys were ready to file intellectual property theft charges immediately after the presentations. He had even arranged for an industry reporter to be present when everything unfolded. It would be the professional equivalent of a public execution. Michael opened his desk drawer and removed the small velvet box containing the wedding bands they had selected together. Simple platinum bands engraved with their initials and the date they had planned to marry. He had been going to surprise Elise by having them blessed by her favorite monk at the Buddhist temple she visited monthly. That particular deception stung unexpectedly. Elise had claimed spiritual practice was important to her, that meditation centered her. Had even that been a performance, or was it possible for someone to genuinely seek spiritual wisdom while systematically betraying their partner? Michael closed the ring box and put it away. Philosophical questions about Elisa's dual nature wouldn't change what needed to be done. He opened his presentation files one last time, reviewing the devastating comparisons between his original work and the designs Harlow would present. The evidence was irrefutable. Michael had even documented the specific flaws he had intentionally incorporated, which would prove definitively that Justin had stolen the designs rather than independently developing similar concepts. There would be no recovery for Harlow Design Group, no professional redemption for Justin, no future in design for Elise. Michael paused, cursor hovering over the file containing their recorded conversation. Was that what he truly wanted? Complete destruction. He had spent a week channeling his pain into planning their downfall, but now, facing the reality of what he was about to do, Michael questioned his motivations. Was this justice or vengeance, protection of his work or punishment for their betrayal? Michael closed his eyes, remembering his father's words when he'd started his firm. Your reputation isn't built on who you destroyed, son, but on what you create. What would be left after tomorrow? His reputation would be intact, but his firm would still face challenges from the scandal. The West Side project might be delayed or canceled entirely. The hundreds of families who would benefit from his sustainable housing would suffer for his personal vendetta. Michael opened his eyes with sudden clarity. The true test wasn't how thoroughly he could destroy his betrayers, but whether he could rise above their tactics while still protecting his work. He turned to his computer and began making changes to his presentation. The evidence of theft remained, but the devastating personal revelations were removed. The focus shifted to the designs themselves, highlighting the innovative solutions Horizon had developed. Next, Michael retrieved his true designs from the encrypted drive and began refining them further. If Justin and Elise thought they had stolen his best work, he would prove them wrong. The energy grid system was reconfigured for greater efficiency. The water reclamation design was simplified for easier implementation. The community spaces were reimagined to better serve residents' needs. Working through the morning, Michael created something distinctly better than what had been stolen. These weren't just modifications to avoid similarity. They were genuine improvements, born from the freedom of starting fresh. By noon, Michael had completed both his revised presentation and the refined designs. He sent the final files to Tasha with a brief note explaining that he had updated some elements based on recent inspiration. Then he called David Foster. "I need to meet with you before tomorrow's presentations," Michael said when David answered. "That's not exactly proper protocol, Michael. This isn't about influencing the decision. It's about protecting the integrity of the process." David was silent for a moment. "This sounds serious." "It is, and it's something I'd rather discuss in person." They arranged to meet at David's office that evening. Before leaving, Michael gathered the evidence he had compiled, including Maria's documentation from inside Harlow Design Group and the time-stamped comparisons of his original work with what Justin was planning to present. Back at the apartment, Michael found Elise packing an overnight bag. "I thought I might stay at my place tonight so you can focus on last-minute preparations," she said casually. "Big day tomorrow." Michael nodded, knowing she was planning to spend the night finalizing strategy with Justin. "Probably a good idea. I'm meeting with the team late anyway." Elise approached and straightened his tie, a gesture that once felt intimate, but now seemed mechanical. "You've worked so hard on this. No matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know I'm proud of you." The sincerity in her voice was perfect, as always. Michael studied her face, searching for any flicker of guilt or regret. There was none. "Thank you," he said simply. "That means a lot." After she left, Michael gathered the remaining items he needed and headed to David's office. The older man greeted him with concern, having clearly sensed the gravity of the situation from Michael's tone. "What's this about, Michael?" "I have evidence that Justin Harlow has obtained unauthorized access to Horizon's designs for the West Side Development Project." David's expression darkened. "That's a serious accusation." "I know." Michael placed a folder on David's desk. "And I have conclusive proof." As David reviewed the documents, his face went from concern to grim. This could invalidate the entire selection process. The city can't award a contract based on stolen intellectual property. "I understand, but I believe there's a way to address this without derailing the project entirely." Michael outlined his proposal: allow both presentations to proceed as planned, but have technical experts present to evaluate the designs. After both firms presented, Michael would submit his evidence of theft, along with Horizon's revised and improved designs that differed significantly from what Harlow would present. "This gives the committee a clean option," Michael explained. "Award the contract based on legitimate work, while still holding the responsible parties accountable." David considered the proposal carefully. "This is unusually measured, given the circumstances. Most people would want blood." "I'm not interested in revenge," Michael said, surprising himself with how true the words felt. "I just want to protect my work and ensure the West Side community gets the development they deserve." "And the personal aspect?" David asked quietly. "Your fiancée's involvement can't be easy to handle." Michael's expression remained controlled, though something flickered in his eyes. "No, it isn't. But I won't let personal pain compromise professional ethics." David nodded slowly. "I'll inform the committee chair that there are concerns about intellectual property that may need to be addressed after the presentations. Without specifics for now. That's all I ask. A fair hearing once all the facts are presented." As Michael left David's office, the weight that had pressed on his chest for days felt lighter. Tomorrow would still be difficult, perhaps the most challenging day of his professional life. But he would face it with integrity rather than rage, creation rather than destruction. The decision felt right in a way that his original plan for revenge never had. The presentation room at City Hall buzzed with anticipation as the selection committee members took their seats. Technical advisors, city officials, and representatives from both firms filled the remaining chairs. Michael spotted Elise sitting beside Justin in the front row. both impeccably dressed and projecting confidence. She caught his eye and offered an encouraging smile, which he returned with calm restraint. By random selection, Harlow Design Group was chosen to present first. Justin approached the podium with practiced ease, his charming smile directed at the committee members he'd cultivated relationships with. Ladies and gentlemen, today we present a revolutionary approach to sustainable urban development, Justin began, launching into a polished presentation. Michael watched attentively as Justin unveiled designs that were exact replicas of the flawed plans Michael had planted. The energy grid system that would collapse under actual implementation. The water reclamation design that wouldn't pass environmental review. The community spaces that prioritized aesthetics over functionality. Several technical advisors exchanged confused glances as Justin extolled the virtues of systems that contained fundamental engineering flaws. One advisor began scribbling notes rapidly, frowning at the calculations displayed on screen. When Justin concluded to polite applause, Committee Chair Stephen Reeves nodded appreciatively. "Impressive work, Mr. Harlow. Very innovative approaches." Michael rose when his name was called, carrying only a small tablet to the podium. He began not with grand proclamations, but with a simple statement of purpose. The West Side development isn't just another project. It represents an opportunity to create sustainable housing for hundreds of families while revitalizing an industrial zone that has long been neglected. Michael's presentation contrasted sharply with Justin's. Where Justin had emphasized flashy renderings, Michael focused on functionality, efficiency, and community integration. His energy system utilized innovative but proven technology. His water reclamation design exceeded environmental standards while reducing costs. His community spaces were designed with input from neighborhood associations and future residents. The technical advisor's expressions shifted from confusion to appreciation as Michael walked them through systems that not only worked but represented genuine innovation. By the time he concluded, the energy in the room had completely changed. "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Reeves said, clearly conflicted by the stark differences between the presentations. "The committee will now take 20 minutes to review both proposals before questions." As the committee members filed out, Michael approached David Foster. "It's time," he said quietly. David nodded and spoke briefly to Reeves. When the committee returned, Reeves addressed the room with obvious discomfort. "Before we proceed with questions, I'm informed there's a matter of professional conduct that must be addressed." He turned to Michael. "Mr. Chen, I understand you have concerns regarding Harlow Design Group's proposal." Michael stood. "Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have evidence that Mr. Harlow illegally obtained proprietary designs from Horizon through corporate espionage." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Justin leaped to his feet. "That's a ridiculous accusation." "Is it?" Michael activated his tablet, projecting onto the main screen a side-by-side comparison of his planted documents and Justin's presentation. These are identical. But more telling is that these designs contain intentional flaws that any competent engineer would have identified and corrected. The technical advisors nodded in agreement as Michael highlighted the specific defects. "Furthermore," Michael continued, "I have documented evidence that these designs were stolen through unauthorized access." He played portions of the recorded conversation between Justin and Elise, carefully edited to focus only on the professional misconduct. As Justin's voice filled the room, boasting about stealing Michael's work, all eyes turned to him. His face trained of color. Beside him, Elise sat frozen, her composure finally shattered. "I have additional documentation from an employee of Harlow Design Group, confirming that these flawed designs were rushed into production despite engineering concerns." Michael gestured to Maria Lopez, who stood at the back of the room, nodding in confirmation. Reeves looked stricken. "Mr. Harlow, do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Justin's attempted denial dissolved into incoherence when Michael presented the final piece of evidence. Timestamped server logs showing when the files had been accessed and copied from Horizon's systems via the spyware installed on Michael's computer. In light of these serious allegations, backed by substantial evidence, the committee has no choice but to disqualify Harlow Design Group from consideration, Reeves announced. "We will need to consult with legal counsel regarding potential criminal charges." As security escorted a protesting Justin from the room, Michael found Elise standing before him, her eyes hollow with the recognition of complete defeat. "It was never about the designs, was it?" Michael asked softly. "It was about proving you could take something from me." "You don't understand," Elise whispered. "You had everything handed to you. Your talent, your opportunities. Justin and I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. So you decided to steal what you couldn't earn. Michael shook his head. I would have collaborated with you both willingly if you'd asked. That's the tragedy here. Elise had no response. As she walked away, shoulders straight despite her humiliation, Michael felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only a profound sadness for what might have been. The committee ultimately awarded the contract to Verizon Design Group, with the stipulation that Michael implement the improved designs he had presented rather than the earlier versions. Within days, the story broke in industry publications, detailing the attempted theft without sensationalizing the personal aspects of the betrayal. 6 months later, Michael stood at the Westside Development groundbreaking ceremony. Construction equipment waited in the background as he addressed the gathered community members and officials. Today marks not just the beginning of construction, but the start of a collaborative effort between Horizon and the Westside community. This project belongs to all of us. The development had evolved significantly since the original proposal. After securing the contract, Michael had organized community design workshops, incorporating residents' ideas into the final plans. The result was a project that the neighborhood had embraced as their own. Back at Horizon's offices, change was equally evident. Michael had restructured the firm, promoting talented team members into leadership roles and implementing policies that encouraged work-life balance. Tasha, now a full partner, had taken over day-to-day operations, allowing Michael to focus on the creative aspects he most enjoyed. Your 4 o'clock is here, his assistant announced one afternoon. Ms. Rivera from the Community Garden Initiative. Michael welcomed Elena Rivera into his office. Their meeting about incorporating urban agriculture into the development evolved into a discussion of sustainable food systems, then dinner at a nearby restaurant. By the end of the evening, Michael had made plans to see her again, a step he'd been hesitant to take since Elise's betrayal. It's not about forgetting what happened, he'd explained to his sister during their weekly phone call. It's about not letting it define every relationship moving forward. I'm proud of you, his sister said. Not everyone could have handled this with such grace. I'm not sure grace is the right word, Michael replied. But I'm learning that trust isn't foolish, it's necessary. You just have to be willing to rebuild when it breaks. Michael had reconnected with family and friends he had neglected during his workaholic years. Sunday dinners at his parents' home became a regular tradition. Monthly hiking trips with college friends provided perspective beyond the professional world he had once made his entire identity. 1 year after the contract award, Michael stood at the edge of the Westside site, watching as the first residential building neared completion. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, community gardens flourished in designated spaces, and the innovative water reclamation system operated at peak efficiency. Elena joined him, slipping her hand into his as they observed the construction. It's amazing seeing it come to life, she said. It's not what I originally envisioned, Michael admitted. It's better. The collaboration made it stronger. As they walked through the site, construction workers and community volunteers greeted Michael by name. He had become a regular presence, working alongside everyone to ensure the project truly served its purpose. That evening, reviewing updated plans in his home office, Michael came across old photos of himself with Elise. He no longer felt the sharp pain of betrayal, just a quiet acknowledgement of a chapter closed. He placed the photos in a box he kept of life lessons learned. His phone chimed with a message from Elena, sharing an article about innovative urban farming techniques they might incorporate. Michael smiled, appreciating how different this relationship felt, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than hidden agendas. The true victory hadn't been exposing the conspiracy or watching his betrayers fall. It had been finding the strength to continue creating, to trust again, to build something meaningful that would outlast the pain. The Westside development would provide homes for hundreds of families for generations to come, while Elise and Justin's betrayal was already fading into an industry footnote. Michael closed his laptop and looked out at the city lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new designs, new connections. He was ready for all of it, no longer defined by what had been taken from him, but by what he continued to build.